Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here at Star Cottage Studio, which is my working studio for Allegory Gallery. So it's been super, super busy um, the past couple days. We have we're participating in a small business kind of thing that is called Acre Project. And what it is there's these couple of small business advocates who run creative businesses or creative organizations in the area that have all kind of joined forces, and their mission is to kind of activate the Johnstown area of southwestern Pennsylvania. Um, so uh, yeah, so we were one of the lucky ones to kind of get in with them, and the idea is that we're working on kind of um, expanding our business and maybe doing pop-up shops in Johnstown and kind of figuring things out, see if we want to open a store in Johnstown. So it's one of those things where it's could be potentially really good. I think it's going to be good regardless of whether or not we find a permanent home in Johnstown or not. My allergies are super crazy today, so my throat's all like rah, rah, rah. But yeah, so anyways, so they're sending a photographer to the studio tomorrow evening. So we have to clean everything basically. And of course, I can't just like clean it up and like sweep it under the rug. I have to clean it up and kind of organize as I go. So we've been working on that the past couple weeks, getting ready for this, but it's a big project. And of course, with Babette being our cat, she's doing a lot better, and I feel comfortable kind of leaving her by herself when we're here. There was a time when I didn't, I was there watching her pretty much like a hawk for 24/7. Um, but anyway, so it's kind of been slow going to get everything up and running right here for the photo shoot that they're going to do tomorrow. Um, and of course, that means, just before picture day, I break out real hard. Well, there's nothing new there. So, anyways, this is going to be a relatively quick video, partially because I feel something twitching in my eye. But the other reason is that I have a meeting right after this for the Great Bead Extravaganza. We have kind of monthly meetings so that we can kind of organize and plan for the events and keep up with each other. So I have to go to that directly after this. So yeah, busy, busy day today. So I'm going to need one of you who's watching to be my timekeeper, because I tried frantically to get my computer to show a clock. I don't have any clocks in here, and I can't see the time on my phone because I'm using the StreamYard, so it won't show the time, and also my computer won't show the time. So I'm going to need somebody to be my timekeeper, and when it gets to 6 o'clock p.m. my time, Eastern time, somebody's going to be like, whoa, 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 it's 6 o'clock. All right. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? So we're going to do a really, I think it's a fun project. Um, Somebody in the last couple videos has talked about doing a little bit of basket weaving. And I'm going to start this off by saying I'm not an expert at that. I do a little bit of it, but most of my stuff is kind of like funky dunky style. So, it's a little bit organic. So there are other people out there in the world that know how to do this way better than I do. And if you're intrigued by what you see here, search those people out. So I would say who it is, but we're like different people you should check out. But we're streaming this to a couple different places, and we have to focus on certain stuff and not on other things. So anyways, if you like this, there are more resources out there. I have a whole shelf of books behind me that's all just wire, and there's all just basket kind of weaving technique. And so there's lots of different resources out there. So does anybody want to volunteer to be my timekeeper? I don't see anybody volunteering. I need a timekeeper. Otherwise, I know I'm going to run late, and they're going to be so mad because I'm hosting the event. So let's try not to do that. And then with William, he's at his other job today. So we're having to do this divide and conquer. All right. Sandra said that she's going to do me a solid and help. All right. So 6 o'clock my time. So I think that's your time also, if I'm not mistaken. Marianne said she'll be my timekeeper too. And June said she'll be mine. So I'll just have lots of timekeepers. All right, so let me flip this around before we get too late, because otherwise, you're gonna be like, wow, that was a really fun start to that project. All right, let me flip this around. You're gonna see the ceiling and the lights. All right, so here we go. So I don't know about you, but I have a bag of these stone donut focals, and I oftentimes I'm like, what am I going to do with these? I like them, I collect them, I have lots of them, but a lot of times I kind of struggle with how to use them. Now, I do use them and have bezel set them and done prong settings and all kinds of stuff. But I thought one of the things that we would do today, since somebody asked, is that we will show a quick-ish, it's kind of quick, style of doing this basket weaving. So I'm going to pull out I want to pick a good one. Some of these, I don't know what the stones are. I have to kind of mess around and find out. Like, this is serpentine. Let's see. And this is probably... This is that pineapple quartz, which is not really quartz at all. But I love it because it's kind of like that. Let's use this one. I was gonna, well, I'll let you pick. Do you think we have enough time for you guys to pick? I'll let y'all pick. All right, so I'll put one more option, and then we'll leave it up to y'all. So this is serpentine. Let me lower this down so you can actually see it. So this is serpentine. This is that pineapple quartz, and this is snowflake obsidian. This is A, this is B, this is C. So what do you want? A, B, or C? A, B, or C? Everybody likes the pineapple so far. Facebook user said pineapple quartz. Robin says pineapple. Marianne says pineapple. I got a couple for the serpentine. Oh, there's one for the snowflake obsidian. There's lots of bees. Okay, let's do bee then. Normally I'd like, I'll let it go for a couple minutes, but we don't really have that much time. So, all right. So one of the tricks that I use is I have this adjustable what do they call this? Somebody help me. It's escaping my brain. Well, I have this, and it's the one that you can adjust and lock, and it's super handy. If you don't have this one, that it's escaping my brain right now. You can also use a ring clamp, which is basically this wood with this wedge, and it will help hold your wires. I don't know about you, but my fingers hurt just looking at wires sometimes. So anything I can do to alleviate this, the better. Robin says channel lock. That sounds right to me. I use these all the time. And they are serrated at the teeth. There are teeth on these. So if you are going to use these for your wire work, just be mindful of that they will get chewed up wherever they lock. But it kind of it is what it is at that point. So just keep that in mind. You will have to trim off some or sand it down or whatever. These ones don't mar the wire, so this is a good option as well. I'm going to use these because I know that they work really well. And sometimes this thing, like the wedge, you really have to get it in there, and sometimes it pops out, which is not the end of the world because we're going to do some rather tight basket weaving. So just keep that in mind. I've also got bail making pliers, and I've got some different things. You don't necessarily have to have bail making pliers. It makes it a lot easier. I will say that. But if you have a dowel rod or whatever, you can use that as well. So just keep that in mind. I've always got my round nose pliers and my chain nose pliers, and I've got some cutters as well. Now, I'm going to use, now this is 16 gauge wire, which is pretty heavy duty for this project. You can do this with a thinner gauge wire. I would say maybe 20 gauge is kind of like the lowest. I mean, I guess you could do it finer than this. The only problem is that it will get very wavy gravy. So it's good to have a wire that is a little bit sturdy for your superstructure. So you'll see what I mean in a second. More than a second, maybe a minute. All right. So here's the 16 gauge wire. This is brass wire. We'll also need a finer gauge wire. This is 22 gauge. In an ideal world, I would have something smaller than this. But I can't find it. And if I start rooting around, it's going to take a long time. But it's big, so that, or it's a little bit bigger, so that way you can kind of see what's going on. So I guess that's a perk of this. So we'll need the thicker wire, a thinner wire, our focal, something to hold our wires, something to cut our wires, and really that's all you need. And you could probably do it with less if you wanted to, but we're going to do it with what we've got. So what I've got here. Now, it's kind of important that your wire is relatively straight. So if you have a piece that's super kinky, not that kind of kinky, but if it's got like a lot of jig jags and kind of different things like that, then you can either flatten it. There's a couple different ways you can do that. If you have two steel blocks, you can roll them. And that's one way to straighten it out. You can actually clamp the end and twist it slightly. That's another way that you can straighten flat wire. Another thing you can do is to run nylon pliers on them. The issue with running nylon pliers is that sometimes you'll get a slight warp in it, so they're not true center. But, that's fine. So I'm going to cut off maybe 10 inches of wire. This is a 16 gauge brass wire. And I'm cutting off more than I probably need. And that's because I will end up probably trimming it, and I can do different things as far as, come on now. I'm trying to get that tape, y'all. But I also don't want it to spring in my face, so. All right, here we go. All right, so I'm going to gently kind of flatten this out so that it's the same kind of relative straightness of the other. And then I'm going to cut this. Now, these are pretty handy. These are double flush cutters. I think they're pretty cool. All right, so here's the trick. You've got to set these channel lock so that they will accommodate this and really clamp this in place. Now, ideally, your wires will be a little bit apart so that you can actually see the basket weave. Now, here's the tricky thing. If you make this too big, it's not going to fit through this hole. So you have to make it so that it is thin enough that it will, this gap is thin enough that it will fit in the hole, but also big enough that you're not going to have like this really puny rinky-dink bail, because it will kind of look weird if the proportions are off. So I kind of eyeball it, precisely eyeball, as they say. And then once I've precisely eyeballed it, I'll squeeze it closed a little bit, and then I will lock this in place. And the reason why I squeeze it in a little bit is that naturally, by the time I get this business clamped, it's going to move. All right. Now, the trick is that sometimes if this wire is too long, it can be a pain in the butt. So if you spread these out just a smidgen, it will help, because I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of spreads it out kind of like a gentle V shape. Just as long as this stays relatively parallel, that as we're working, that's the one that's important. All right. So I'm going to cut off. Oops. Now, depending on what kind of wire you use, will also determine how easily your project will be. So if you use fine silver, it will move like butter. I recommend using like a sterling silver wire for your base wires if you're going to go the silver route, and then use like the fine silver, and it will weave easily. Fine silver is super, super soft. It's a really wonderful material for that kind of process. Now, if you're using a different kind of wire, copper wire will work. just make sure you're using the dead soft. If you use half hard or hard wire for this, it will be, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's almost nightmarish time when when it starts kinking and getting troublesome. So the more you weave, the more you're work hardening the wire, and it's going to be a headache if you try to use something that's like a hard wire. So use dead soft wire, whatever it is, and it will make your life easier. All right. So we've got this. I'm going to measure off a wingspan. That's probably too much wire, but oh well. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, and I'm going to try to do this and not stab myself, is I'm going to kind of make these parallel to each other. And I'm going to start at this top part here. And I'm going to go under this wire. And I'm going to leave myself a tail. And the tail is going to be, a couple inches or so. Oh, actually, I'm not going to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start higher up here, not close to the jaws, because I'm going to end up trimming this. So I'm going to start actually up here. So this is probably giving myself 2 inches or so. And then I'm going to put this parallel and I'm going to wrap it around one time. All right. And then what I'm going to do is kind of awkward to get started. Okay. So you wrap this around one time. If you want, you can use pliers to get this started. All right. And then what we're going to do is go over this one. Okay. Over this one. And oops, this is getting tangled, y'all. That's the trick about working with too thick wire, is that it's not going to want to do what you want to do. Right. So we went over this one and around. And if we have to trim some of this off, it's not going to be the end of the world. All right. So until we kind of get it started. All right. So I've kind of done this kind of basket weave, this figure 8. Now, if you want, you can do different techniques to do this. So, and what I mean by that is you can experiment with how many times you wrap, and that will determine how tightly your piece is, if there's a pattern. All right. So I've got this started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap over this, over one, and then I'm going to wrap around the whole thing. So that's 2. And then come up underneath. And I'm pulling tightly. And I'm just going to wrap around this one once, coming up through that V shape, going over the top. And it's confusing, but you kind of get into the pattern of it once you get going. And this looks like a hot mess, y'all, but it eventually kind of works itself out. Trust me, it does. But it is kind of tight because this is a thicker gauge wire. So if you use a thinner gauge wire, it will make your life a lot easier, just so you know. I actually might switch to something thinner because this is getting kind of a headache. It's so thick. Let me do something thinner. I hate to say that, but oh wow. I'll save this wire and chop it off. But it's just super, super hard. And I'm using brass wire, which is a harder wire anyways. Let me look real fast. All right, I've changed course, y'all. I've got the fine silver wire. This is super thin. I'm guessing it's 20 something gauge, 24 gauge. I think this is 24 gauge. This is actually not fine silver because this has a, well, it feels like fine silver. And it's super dead soft because it's super malleable. I can feel it. And this wire has been, it's super kind of chewed up, but it's soft enough that we can get it to work. And actually work well. All right, so since I'm using this finer wire, I am gonna give myself a wee bit more wire to work with. I'm gonna set this off to the side. This is almost like working with thread now. All right, so I went over once, and then I'm gonna come through this middle section and wrap around and over. So wrap in the middle. It's making a figure 8, and then wrap around once, all the way around. I don't know if you can see that or not. So we're going to wrap around the front of this, and then spread these out just a wee bit. Wrap once around this side, come up through there, wrap around the back. And this is one of those things where the more you do it, the easier it kind of gets. So basically, I'm just making figure 8s with this wire. I'm going to keep that tension kind of as much as I can. And so I'll do a figure 8. And it's good to keep your tools out of the way, because what I'm finding is that this is wanting to get stuck on stuff, and then that's less than desirable, you know? And then so pull it tight, and then every once in a while squinch it down. So you do a figure 8, and then you wrap it all the way around. And once you get kind of going, it creates its own rhythm. And I'm not being super precise. I know that like you can build a pattern into this. And if you do more wraps around here like this, you can kind of create spaces, and where it's kind of, it has a more a block to it. And what I mean by that is that it'll be a little bit wider on certain sides. And just make sure that you push this down every once in a while. And eventually it kind of makes its own tension. So eventually we're going to get to the point where we need to keep the wires kind of parallel to each other so that they don't and it probably works a little bit easier if you are working with smaller pieces. So if you've got kind of a design in your mind, you could probably roll this up the end until you get to the place that you want. And then it'll be less likely to get tangled. But this is where you can put your creativity into it and put the patterns in if you want. So like I was saying, if you wrap it 1 and then 2, and then you do your 1 and then 2, you're going to get a little bit of a different look, because that's going to create those spaces in between. So if you do like 1, 2, then wrap it, and then do 1, 2, and then wrap it on the top. It'll have a different look. And I'm kind of just messing around, y'all, to be honest. If you want a more structured pattern, you could definitely figure it out. I like a more organic look to my pieces, so I don't mind if it's a little bit different. Oops. And it's also easier when you don't have the camera on you, because then you have to kind of, it's in the way. So just keep that in mind in case you're like, whoa, that looks so terrible. Yeah, normally you could have this closer to your body, and it's a little bit more ergonomic than if you're kind of have it like I'm kind of hunched over and standing up. So it's a little bit awkward, because I want to have this in the camera angle for you so you can actually see what's going on. All right, so basically you just keep wrapping these around and you form, I want to say that if you go at this with a plan, you'll be a lot more successful. Um, this is fine. I mean, this is okay. But you can see that it looks a little bit, you can see where I dropped the pattern and switch to a different one. But since this is kind of a sample, that's fine. But if this was like a finished piece, I would probably practice the one that I wanted a little bit more. But you can see the difference of how this looks. So this is going around, wrapping around once, and then doing the figure 8, wrapping around once, doing the figure 8, and going around after. So This is wrap around this one, go through the V section, wrap around this one, over, and then, so basically you're tightening it on, making a figure eight, tightening it on, going around the top, tightening it on, going around the back, tightening it on, doing the figure eight. And so you're going every other one so that it creates this kind of, so it's a little bit like there's a coil, there's a line, there's a coil, there's a line, there's a coil, there's a line. I'm probably not just explaining that very well, but with this one up here, which is a little bit looser, so it's a wrap around twice, go around, wrap around twice, go around. And so this has a little bit more of an open kind of structure. So you just have to play around with it until you get the kind of the pattern that you're happy with. And that's where you can kind of really insert your creativity. It is important to keep your tension relatively tight. So if you and also to squeeze your wires down closer so that they're touching. And because if you get that structure, if you get that tight enough, it looks a little bit better. I mean, this is going to be, it's going to be what it is. It's not going to be like a masterpiece because it's kind of a slapdash sample that has a lot of different weaves into it. But if you really kind of be mindful about it, you can get some really cool things. Now, if you wanted to do just a figure eight, you could do just a figure eight also. I think that makes a really pretty look. Now, one thing to be mindful of is that when you're pressing these wires down, not to go over them. And what I mean by that is that if you go over the previous wire, it's going to create a kink kind of like this instead of having this be super smooth and basket-like. So just keep doing this or whatever pattern you want, and it will eventually give you enough length that you can work with it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to finish this up as fast as possible so that you can see what I'm talking about to turn this into a bale. In theory, I should have done a step out beforehand so that you could see this, you know, a little bit quicker instead of, you know, in real time. But this is going relatively quick. So, I mean, it's up to you. And I'm definitely like switching my pattern up a lot. So if that's not for you, then that's not for you. But you can see how using the thinner gauge, the finer gauge wire for this makes it a lot easier. Like this is way easier than when I was struggling at the first part with a thicker 22 gauge brass. So, you know, it is what it is. If you use the wire that is thinner, then it will, and dead soft, and is not a, brass is a super kind of hard wire. So, all right. Sandra says it's 5:45. You have 15 minutes left. All right. So I'm almost done with this weaving part. Once I get down to the end, it's helpful to get, I I like to use these chain nose pliers because you can get in there really tight and secure it down at least 3 wraps. And that will really tight wraps. And that will make sure that it doesn't come loose. It is kind of visually, you can see it, but once you have everything else going on, you won't be able to see it. Now, this is where it's super good to have flush cutters, to which I don't. So I'm going to just peel this up a little bit. In theory, I have flush cutters somewhere. Well, that's not going to be great. So normally you wouldn't use these, but I can't find my flush cutter. So those are German shears for cutting sheet metal. So once you get this in there, you unlock this, and then look how wonderful. No, but it's a little bit wavy gravy style. All right, and then make sure you're tight down here on this end, and you lock it down on this one. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is kind of flatten this out ish and spread this out so you can get the best pattern possible. And Janice says, what size wire did you use for the size? This is 16 gauge brass wire. So what we're going to do is make sure this fits through it and then kind of give yourself a bend. And I did that too early. So we're going to go in about 1/2 inch or so and give yourself a bend. And wherever the wires chewed up, we're going to trim off. And what we're going to do is, it's a little bit awkward, but we're going to take this. You see this like this V shape. I don't know if you can see that or not. And then I'm just going to curl this in, and I'm going to make a kind of a curly Q. Now, whenever you hear that snapping, that's not a necessarily good sound because that means that the wire is getting a little bit marred up. So you just have to be kind of patient and do gentle motions. I'm kind of rushing a little bit, if you couldn't tell. So it's getting a little bit where a little bit kind of messed up, but oh well. All right. So I've got this, and it kind of looks like a ram head right there. And I can kind of even it out if I want. And go around here like so. And then press it up. Like so. All right. So that kind of looks weird right now. And it is a little bit awkward. But we're going to trim these. So that they're even. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And I will say that when you're doing this, like, and you're not having to rush, it's actually really kind of nice. You know, it's kind of relaxing and meditative, and it's not like you're frantically trying to get this to line up just so. All right. So I'm flattening these out. I've made this ram head on the back side. And then that's where these bail making pliers come in handy. So if you have a really long one, really long bail, uh, where you added a lot of wire and made this really long, you could use this and it could be really cool. You can also plan this out, and when you get these kind of parallel, you can hammer them with a nylon hammer and it will work harden your wire a little bit, and that will help as well, to keep them kind of as parallel as possible. But you can also plot these out so that they're a little bit more, um, you know, if you want it to be more V-shaped, you could do that. So right now I'm using my bail pliers to make the bail. And if your wire gets unstretched, it's kind of like a spring. You can always kind of adjust it so that it will fill in any of the gaps that you made. But in theory, this is what it'll look like. And granted, this one is a little bit higher and this is a little bit. So I'm going to just work to get these a little bit more even. And this will make a kind of nice little bail for you for these donuts. And the cool thing is that if you use one of these transparent stones, you can kind of see it. If I was doing this again, I would make this a little bit more even because this is a little bit even more wavy gravy than my usual style. And maybe tighten this up as a smidge. So you have a hole in there like this. And then what we'll do, you can file these ends down. I should mention that. So if you have a cupper or anything like that, you can go on these tips of this wire, and this will make the ends of the wire a little bit smoother. But I think that that's fun. And then if you have silk or beads or whatever, you can just pass this through. Now, if your basket weave is tight enough, it won't have any kind of sharp, kind of jagged things to catch. So you'll be able to kind of fluidly hang your pieces off using this. So there you go. Marianne says 5-minute warning. I'm done. All right. So I think that turned out okay. It could have been better, but it is a demo and we kind of rushed it around. All right. There we go. So we made this. I don't think it's terrible. It could be a little bit more finesse, definitely. And if you make this part, the bail, longer, so it overhangs a little bit more, it'll be a little bit more structured. But also, the more you kind of work with this, the more work hardened it gets. But I think that turned out pretty nice. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. So what the takeaway from this is, use work hardened or use dead soft wire for the weaving wire. Use something to hold the wires still so your fingers aren't constantly having to grip. And also, just take your time and be mindful. Also, if you have the ability, sand your ends of your wires in. This is also a chance where if you have your torch, you could ball the ends of those wires up so that they have a nice kind of decorative end to it. But I think this is fun. And just practice your basket weaving, and find the pattern that works for you and then stick with it. Because if you switch, I mean, you can't really tell that well from far away that I switched a lot, but you can definitely kind of, if you start examining it, you can see where I messed up. Um, but oh well, that's life. Um, so I think that's fun. All right, I've got to go to my other meeting. I hope you had a good time. And if you do make anything using this technique, hopefully yours will look better than mine. Share it in our design challenge group. We do have 2 new design challenge kits up right now. There's the Mermaid Serenade and the Royal Road. We also have a bunch of little mini inspiration kits that just launched, and we also added a new luxury bead blend, which is pretty fun. It's got some fun lucite components. I've got this right here, and I think that could be cool if you layered maybe added some leaves, some of these lucite leaves to it. Maybe make another of these bales, but put it through the bottom and then hang stuff off of those pieces. I hope that in my videos that I show you techniques that are useful, that even if you don't plan on doing exactly what I'm going to do, they're kind of like stepping stones and they are building blocks so that you can go on and then make it your own. So, like, if I did this, I probably would take and wire crystals or beads or something along the edges of these, maybe make these a little bit bigger and wire those on there. I think that could be cool. So, there's a lot of possibility with this kind of weaving and wire technique. And I think that if you're mindful about the tools you use, it will make your life a lot easier. So hopefully you're going to have lots of fun doing that. All right. I will see you all later. Hopefully you have a good rest of your week. We may or may not be on live tomorrow because of the photo shoot. I'd love to show you kind of like the behind the scenes of the photo shoot, even if it's just like a couple of seconds or so, and talk a little bit more about the Acre project because I think it's a really cool opportunity. But we'll see what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. All right. See you all later. Bye-bye.